Right side to the 10, to the 5, touchdown! Sit, go into the hoop, puts it up, puts it in! A fantastic play.
Welcome into the Richard Schwartz and Associates studio for episode number 23 of Magnolia Fields. This is the Hottie Toddy edition. He's Brad Logan. I'm Frank Dodds. And Brad, we really have to stop meeting like this. Second time in a row we're in the studio after an Ole Miss loss.
And it was a tough one. And you can't sugarcoat it by saying that it was one of the worst losses. It's the worst loss in the Lane Kiffin era, one of the worst losses in the foreseeable future, or at least the past for Ole Miss football. At the end of the day, Frank, you've got two conference losses, and we'll talk about it, obviously, as the episode moves forward. But where is this team mentally? Where does this team have to go for the next couple of weeks to kind of rein things back in to get ready for the stretch run? Is there a path to the college football playoff for this team? What has to happen? We'll get into it. But to say that the loss against LSU, gut-wrenching fashion in overtime, you lead the entire game until the final couple of seconds of regulation. You lose the game by 3 points. The previous game against Kentucky, Frank, guess what? You lost by 3 points. So the silver lining is you're right there. They just haven't been able to close the games like they needed to this year.
Well, and you'll see by our titles where we have a little Clint Eastwood theme going on with our subtitles. This first segment is the LSU game, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There was some good. You referenced it. It's been since 2008 since Ole Miss beat LSU at Baton Rouge. So it's not a game we didn't come in the season thinking we might not win. We certainly all knew there was a potential on Saturday night in Baton Rouge to lose that game. The problem is it's compounded because of the earlier loss to Kentucky.
Right. And this summer, when you and I visited, Frank, I thought Ole Miss was going to win the game, and I felt very confident going into the game that Ole Miss was going to come out on top. They were about a 3.5-point favorite. And it was a situation where I felt like, and still do, that Ole Miss has a little bit better roster than LSU. This game wasn't won or lost by the Caden Davis missed field goal. It wasn't won or lost by a missed tackle or a conversion of 4th and 7 late in the game by LSU, 2 fourth-down conversions. This game was won and lost in the first quarter. Ole Miss should have been up 27-0. If you talk about drop touchdown passes, unconverted 4th and 1 plays. There was a fumble deep inside LSU territory by Henry Parrish Jr. So that's 21 points right there, Frank, that Ole Miss should have had. The game should have been over by halftime. But you know what? Credit Brian Kelly. Credit LSU. They persevered. They came ready to play in the second half. They made the adjustments. But Ole Miss has to do a better job of scoring in the red zone. They have to do a better job of catching those balls that Jackson Dart, who, by the way, I thought played much better than he did against Kentucky. I thought he handled the offense really well, and he managed a really good offensive game plan, specifically in the first half. They just didn't get the points they needed. You go into half, Frank, at 17-13. What feels like should have been at least 31-13. So it's a situation to where Ole Miss allowed LSU to stay in the game. And I had a conversation with a media member before we went out onto the field with about 6 minutes to go in the game, and he said, I've been covering Ole Miss and the SEC for a number of years, and anytime you allow a team like LSU, even great teams allow teams like LSU stay in the game, late in the game, crazy things happen inside Tiger Stadium. You made mention since they haven't won since 2008. A lot of that is because of the crowd involvement. It's a different place, and I said on my postgame show, Frank, that there's only one place that I've ever went to where I felt like the crowd in the stadium made that much of a difference, and that is, of course, Tiger Stadium at Baton Rouge.
And a lot of people came out of there saying that was a top 3 crowd ever at LSU.
Right.
In terms of noise and excitement. And exactly to your point, should have buried them earlier, had a chance to take the crowd out of it. The good news is when we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly,
right,
there's some good news.
Absolutely.
Defense that has given up 20 points in regulation twice against LSU and Kentucky and still lost.
And you talk about the defense, of course, that's led by defensive coordinator Pete Golding, and I thought Pooh Paul, the linebacker, played incredibly well. I thought Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle for Ole Miss, played really well. Jared Ivey, J.J. Pegues, they've done some really good things. I thought Trey Amos played well. Jane Kennedy had a tough night, specifically in the second half, and LSU had some really talented receivers. Tight end Mason, of course, his dad played for the Miami Dolphins is a Hall of Famer, Jason Taylor. And so Mason Taylor is his name, and he was really good down the stretch for LSU. But this game, like I said, was won and lost in the first quarter, in the first half. That that Ole Miss defense did not give up more than one touchdown until the final seconds of the game. They played good enough to win the game. Of course, LSU scores going in to the overtime period, but they gave up a bunch of field goals. They bended, but they didn't break. And that has been a perfect recipe for Ole Miss this year. This has all been about the offense. This hasn't been about the defense. I think the defense has played well enough to win every single game they've been in. So the silver lining, I said it a moment ago, you lead both games until the final seconds of the game. In this case, the final seconds of the regulation against LSU. And you only lose each game by 3 points apiece. So obviously you would like to be undefeated, which everybody expected Ole Miss to be. Maybe not undefeated, but at least 7-1 or 6-1 instead of 5-2. But this is where the team is. And Frank, you look at what they're going to have to do in the next couple of weeks. It's a trip to Arkansas. It's obviously a home game against Oklahoma and Georgia. And then a trip to Florida before the Egg Bowl. It's an opportunity where I could make an argument that Ole Miss wins out. And there's an opportunity where I could make an argument they lose maybe 2 or 3 more games.
Well, that's our second segment. Well, we can go ahead and go to that, subtitled Heartbreak Ridge. The missed opportunities in this game, when compounded with the loss to Kentucky. Had they not lost to Kentucky and dropped this game,
wouldn't matter.
You would still feel good about the season.
You feel good, Frank, because you think you could. Ole Miss can at that point go 10-2 with losses to Georgia and LSU, and I think they're probably making the playoffs with a loss to LSU and Kentucky, who has already lost to South Carolina, who just recently lost to Vanderbilt. It does not have the cachet that a Georgia or LSU has. LSU's got some tough games down the stretch for them as well. I mean, they've got a Missouri game coming up this weekend. They've got an Arkansas game coming up this weekend that is not going to be easy. They've got a Texas A&M team that's really good down the stretch. They've got Missouri the last game of the year. So they've got some losses probably coming too. If you're Ole Miss, and if the nuts were candy and nuts and all that good stuff, but if you're Ole Miss and you finish 10-2, you're absolutely hoping for chaos. And what I mean by that is so many teams throughout the SEC just beat up on each other. Does a 3-loss team make a 12-team playoff? I don't know. I had some analysts tell me they believe they do. And so if you're 10-2 and you're Ole Miss, you're hoping for chaos because the SEC is going to get 4 teams. I don't think there's any doubt about it. They're going to get 4. The Big Ten's going to get 4, maybe 3 or 4, and then you can bust up the P5, and then the Big 12 may get 1 or 2. But
the ACC might get 2. Clemson's playing pretty well.
Clemson,
Miami,
right. maybe 2. So then you start talking about, well, if the SEC only gets 3 and then 3, Ole Miss in that pecking order right now is not where they need to be. But we're not at the end of the year. So many people are throwing in the towel, and I get that. But there's so much football to be played. Ole Miss is just doing some small things that they have got to correct, and I think the team can be okay. But is the water already out of the boat? That's the big question. I don't know the answer to that. We'll know in the next couple of weeks, but is there anything they can do? And I don't know.
Let me get your opinion on this, and it's on the offensive side.
Yeah.
Right now, defense playing pretty good, keeping them below 20. You should, if you'd come in the season and said they're going to hold LSU to 20. You would have said
it's a win all day.
It's a win all day.
Yep, that's got 38-20 all over.
They're going to hold Kentucky to 20.
That's 42-20 all day.
Yes.
7-0 undefeated, getting ready for a bye week. Oklahoma up next.
So the question has to be asked: where for Ole Miss is the breakdown? I think the play calling, the offensive line with some players that maybe aren't as skilled as you hoped when they came out of the transfer portal, which is always one of the dangers, as well as injuries. Where is the breakdown on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, that's a very layered question, and I'll answer it like this. I think there's a breakdown. Number one, it's your quarterback position.
He's regressed.
Jackson Dart has not played as well as we would have thought he would have played this year. Now, there are some components to that has led to his regression. Now, can he figure some things out? I think he played much better in the first half against LSU. The wide receiver room now is one that has injuries. Trey Harris has a injury that he's dealing with on top of a lower leg injury that he's dealing with. So you've got to figure out who's going to step up receiver. Caden Davis did so I was really impressed with Jordan Watkins, although they haven't targeted him as much as I would have liked. And then, of course, tight end Caden Prescorn is not seeing the targets that I would expect. The middle of the field was wide open against LSU. Ole Miss never utilized it. Now, a lot of that could go on the dart, but a lot of that, too, goes on the offensive front. Reese McIntyre got a holding foul in overtime. He got a snapping foul that was another 5 yards, so that's 15 yards. They attempt a 57-yard kick, and they make it. Juice Wells is not performing like Ole Miss would like him to perform, the wide receiver. He dropped a touchdown pass. He dropped also a pass in overtime that would have given Ole Miss an opportunity inside the red zone, maybe inside the 10. So I think the offensive line is obviously an issue. I talked about Reese McIntyre with the holding foul. They're hoping they can get Jeremy James back, who's got a broken.
I think that's the key.
He's got a broken bone in his right hand. He could have went this past Saturday, I was told. They elected not to go. They wanted another week. So now he'll have 2 weeks to get ready for Oklahoma. Caleb Warren will be the center, I was told, against Oklahoma. So he was ready to go 2 weeks ago against Kentucky. They wanted to wait with him. Waited this week, and now next week he'll have 3 additional weeks, so he should be ready to go. Gerquan Scott didn't play a ton this past Saturday. He has not been the offensive lineman that Ole Miss would like him to be. He was a transfer out of Southern Miss, and it just hasn't worked out. Julius Buello is one of those offensive linemen for Ole Miss that, and Nate Kalepo, they've been okay, Frank, but they have not been as good as they were under Kalen DeBoer at Washington last year. They have not performed like Ole Miss would have liked him to. So,
or is there a difference in the level of talent they're playing against?
It could be. That's a good point. It very well could be because, they were playing in the Pac-12 at that point.
And the defenses are different out there.
They are much different, and they're much more pass-happy, and the running game has not been where it needs to be. And there's a whole ball of wax that needs to be opened, and that is, of course, running back Ulysses Bentley Jr. He played, averages over 6.5 yards a carry this year. Where in the world, Frank, has Ulysses Bentley been? They finally allowed him to play against LSU, and he was the best running back on the field. Both teams, where's he been? I feel like if Ulysses Bentley plays against Kentucky, I think Ole Miss wins that game. And they finally utilized him. Henry Parrish Jr. was just banged up against LSU.
Up, yes.
Matt Jones was out, he did not play. We have not seen any additional running backs this year. We've not seen Amos, the transfer out of Miami of Ohio. So where does it stand? This should be the Quinshon. That's who they miss, by the way, and that was a Freudian slip. They miss Ulysses Bentley, and then him being here last week against LSU was huge. But, yeah, Quinshon Judkins is missed in Oxford.
Before we turn the page and talk about upcoming games and other games you need to pay attention to, and hopefully we'll even get some volleyball and soccer news in here. Basketball season's coming up. Coach Beard had a press conference yesterday. Coach Yo has one today. Before we do all that, let's take a break. We'll be right back. Episode 23 of Magnolia Fields. You stay tuned.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, you know who to call. Call me. Remember, one call, that's all.
Welcome to the Richard Schwartz and Associates Magnolia Field Studios. One call, that's all.
Welcome back in to episode 23, the Richard Schwartz and Associates Studio, Magnolia Fields. He's Brad Logan. I'm Frank Dodds. Third reference to the Clint Eastwood movie, as we talk about the bye and Oklahoma and everybody else, every which way but loose. They've got to play. They got to hold on tightly. They've got games, winnable games. Georgia has proven that they're beatable. Georgia's not the Georgia of last year or the year before, I don't think. They've got the bye week. You've referenced it a couple times. Heal some injuries, hopefully. Maybe even some people they were holding out that could have gone to get them this extra week. Latest bye in the SEC, only team this week with a bye in the SEC. And then they've got Oklahoma. Talk a little bit, if you will, about what the Rebels must do to win the rest of them.
Well, we met with Lane Kiffin on Monday at our media availability, and he came in and said all the right things. But, Frank, what was interesting is that he came back to the press conference.
I saw that. Came back in.
He's never done that in my tenure of covering Ole Miss. He's never done that in his career. He came back, and basically I'll summarize as best I can. He spoke with someone on the staff that's been around for a while, and they basically emanated to him that the fans were very upset, and they have set a precedence for not accepting losing, and he kind of created that monster, very similar to what Mike Bianco did in baseball. So if you create that monster, you have to feed that monster. And the Ole Miss fan base in regards to football, they're very vibrant. And I think basically what Lane was saying is he understands the importance of winning, and nobody will fight harder for this team than him. And once again, I'm kind of paraphrasing what he said. But I thought it was interesting that he came back. That's why I think we'll see.
I think the message there was, isn't it great that we have that expectation? We didn't used to have those expectations.
That's true. That's true, and I agree with that. But on the flip side, when the fans and the Ole Miss Grove Collective do their part, they're expecting the coaching staff and the players to do theirs. And I just think it was important when Lane came back to address that and to say, we understand your buy-in for this team. We understand your commitment to athletics at Ole Miss, and we want you to know.
And your expectations.
Yes, and we appreciate that. That's why I think the team will play really well against Oklahoma. I think they'll execute much better than they did against LSU. Here's the thing. Against Kentucky, Frank, and I'd love your thoughts on this, it felt like Ole Miss rolled the ball out and said, it's Kentucky. We've got this. No big deal. And they didn't. 1,000%. I think we talked about it on our last episode together. It is so difficult for these teams to get up 3, 4, 5 that you can't not expend that energy and that emotion. And I thought they came out flat. I think they chose not to spend that energy on the Kentucky game, thinking that we need to relax a little bit. We need to do what we do, and we should come out all right. We'll be fine. Let's get ready for LSU.
Fine. That the disappointing part to me in the Kentucky game was the lack of halftime adjustments. That doesn't cost energy. That's not an emotion. It's a game plan.
Well, I don't know that anyone would ever admit this, but I firmly believe that not only did the players roll the ball out there, I think the coaching staff did.
That's why I thought the lack of halftime adjustments was our plan's going to win. Stick to the plan.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it. If Ole Miss had the ball down 20-17 with right at 2.5 minutes to go at around their own 35, final score Ole Miss 24-20. Let's survive in advance and let's move to the next week.
Exactly.
That didn't happen. So the point I'm trying to make is then you fast forward to LSU, they laid everything on the line for LSU.
Absolutely.
They played hard. They played well. Frank, they just didn't execute. They didn't catch the touchdown pass. They didn't convert the 4th and 1. It was a horrible play call on the goal line. They fumbled the football down inside LSU
trying to go
territory.
fast.
Yeah.
I don't mind going fast, getting to the line of scrimmage. But then let's take a breather because we've held them in place. Let's turn to the sideline, get to the line of scrimmage fast. Is different than snapping the ball fast.
When Ole Miss was on the goal line against Kentucky, they brought in Gerquan Scott as an up back. He was able to kick the defensive end. Against LSU, they brought Jordan Watkins in from receiver. They went fast, and they put him on a defensive end, and he could not block him.
No.
The defensive end crashes, makes the tackle, ball's going the other way. So just so many schematical errors for Ole Miss against LSU, and that's why they lost the game. But I think from a enthusiasm standpoint, I think from a preparation standpoint, that should have been a touchdown to Trey Harris in the first drive of the game.
Yeah.
And so I think the coaches had them ready. I think Ole Miss was ready for LSU, and they outplayed LSU, but they did not play them on the scoreboard, and that's all that matters.
Let's talk a little bit about Oklahoma. Bye week, Oklahoma, Rebs must win, and you got to start there.
Yeah.
Because then you got to go on the road at Arkansas, and then you've got Georgia. So Oklahoma, the team I thought they would be coming into this season. They're 4-2, 1-2 in the SEC.
Right.
They've got, stop me if you've heard this before, a good defense and not a great offense.
Yeah.
We heard the same thing about Kentucky. We heard the same thing about South Carolina, which was a win on the road, a good win for Ole Miss. We kind of heard the same thing about LSU. Nussmeier is a game manager. They're not great offensively, and LSU, I don't even know if you can give them credit for having a great defense this year. They certainly didn't last year. Oklahoma has a Brent Venables defense, but they don't have the offense to go with it.
They don't, and it's a situation where they're exactly where we thought they would be. But I don't think they're even as good as I anticipated, because losing 34-3 to Texas, your rival, the game was never competitive in the Red River rivalry, and it's not like they went into Darrell K. Royal and played. This is at a neutral site in Dallas, which means the crowd is half and half. There's 40,000 Texas fans, there's 40,000 Oklahoma fans. So this was a great opportunity for them to face a Texas team that we saw, Mississippi State, played much better. Now, they had Quinn Ewers back, and I get they probably went into that game much differently than they did against Mississippi State. But this is a team that Ole Miss should beat. And I haven't seen an early line on this, but I'm expecting to be 7 to 10 points. It feels like Ole Miss should be able to go out and take advantage of Oklahoma, specifically, Frank, not just because of Ole Miss's offense, but their defense. They should really limit
I think
Oklahoma's offense.
I think Oklahoma's having offensive line worries
and quarterback problems.
But again, back to Lane Kiffin's expectations and those being higher than ever before. We're sitting here kind of just saying, ho hum, Oklahoma's coming to town.
Right.
Used to be you would have said Oklahoma's coming to town, but they've lost a little bit of that swagger.
Yeah, the last time Ole Miss played Oklahoma, many will remember that are watching, was in 1999, and that was in the Shreveport Independence Bowl. And it was
the night the lights were going out.
Yeah.
2000K was rolling.
That's exactly right. The joke I had,
everything was going to turn off at midnight.
The joke that I have is that where were you when Y2K happened? I said I was in Shreveport, Louisiana, at Independence Stadium.
We were driving to the hotel.
Yeah. And
in Shreveport.
Independence Stadium, and there Les Bentley makes the field goal. Ole Miss wins, I think, 27-25 over Oklahoma, if memory serves. But the interesting part about that Bob Stoops coached team, the following year, Josh Heupel was the quarterback. They win the 2000 national championship. So that's the Oklahoma team a lot of people remember, all the history that comes with Oklahoma and winning that national championship. But I don't know if they anticipated coming to the SEC and just kind of running roughshod over everybody. But you and I didn't think they would, and they haven't so far. And so it's a situation to where they're just kind of run of the mill right now. Is there a situation to where they get back to where they were with Billy Sims and with Barry Switzer and everything we know about Oklahoma football? I think there's a chance, but right now they're not there with Brent Venables as their head coach.
And you just mentioned a word. There's a lot more parity in the SEC than I thought there was going to be.
And we're going to have, and
with Vanderbilt winning big games, and
we'll get to your Fab 15 in a moment. But there is some games coming up this weekend that if you're a couch potato, you can have no vested interest in. If you're an Ole Miss fan, it's a great day to watch college football because they're lined up from 11 o'clock until 8 o'clock. And they're really good games. And, Frank, they could go either way. I think all of them but two have a less than a 4.5-point spread, which is fun for a college football fan. And it's chaos, and that's what Ole Miss needs if it can win out.
And the playoffs have added to it.
Oh, no doubt. Every game is a playoff game. This was a playoff game this past Saturday for Ole Miss.
Everyone's a play-in game from here on out. Let's take one final break on episode 23 of the Magnolia Fields podcast. We'll be back right after this.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, you know who to call. Call me. Remember, one call, that's all.
Welcome back to the Magnolia Field Studios, brought to you by Richard Schwartz and Associates. One call, that's all.
Welcome back into the Richard Schwartz and Associates studio. Brad, Logan, Frank Dodds with you. Real quickly, our next to last headline is Any Which Way You Can, and that's kind of descriptive of the volleyball and soccer teams. They're ongoing. October is my favorite sports month. The weather's still good. You can still get out and play golf, but you've got some great sports and volleyball going on and football and Major League Baseball playoffs have been fabulous. Basketball's right around the corner. But a quick update on the volleyball team. They're 12-5, 2-3. They're doing pretty well. They'll be at South Carolina this Friday night and down here in Starkville next Wednesday. The soccer team struggling a little bit. 5-10-1, 0-6-1 the SEC. But if you're looking for something to do Friday night and you don't want to go to a high school football game, which I highly recommend, pick out your favorite high school team and go, or just go pick 2 random teams. It's going to be a good game. But if not, you can come out and support the Lady Rebels against Mississippi State, who has a pretty good soccer team.
Yeah, they're good this year.
Friday night at 7 o'clock. They're on campus. They'll be on the road next Thursday at Oklahoma. That's the other fall sports going on right now. Let's turn the page and let's go to, well, you want to talk basketball just a minute?
Just a minute. I just wanted to add that Chris Beard met with the media over in Birmingham. It's SEC Media Day. They came out. They were ranked in the top 25, Frank, and that is somewhere that Ole Miss doesn't land.
No.
Very
and he was
often
talking about
in
maybe having the
preseason
SEC
polls.
Player of the Year.
Yes, and so I'm excited to see what this team can do. The schedule this year is going to be very challenging. We'll talk about basketball, obviously, as it gets closer. And the SEC Women's Media Day is today as we record, and Coach Yo is really excited about her team. I had a chance to visit with her about a week ago, and she loves her new transfer players. There are 3 of them that are coming in this year, and we'll talk once again more about that as basketball gets closer. But I don't know that we've ever seen more hype and more enthusiasm. Pinch me if you've heard that before, if you're a football fan. But more hype and enthusiasm about basketball, men's and women's, than Ole Miss than this year.
So, and the final headline is High Plains Drifter. You were talking about being in your house, drifting back and forth. I was picturing myself with 4 TVs going, one on the patio with a game going, one in the den,
Yes.
one in the kitchen with a different game going, and maybe something on an iPad or a laptop or something. But, yeah, these were pre-selected before the season, and you can see pretty good feel on maybe where we might be,
right,
other than Ole Miss having lost to Kentucky, and I still think that's the biggest missed opportunity there was. This weekend, Alabama at Tennessee.
Huge game.
Georgia at Texas.
Huge game. And
I'm going to add, this was not preseason. If you're an Ole Miss fan, LSU at Arkansas, who you rooting for?
I think you're pulling for Arkansas.
But you still got to play Arkansas.
If you can beat Arkansas, that knocks. You could. There are 2 ways to look at it.
You don't want LSU to have some cachet, as you mentioned earlier. About
you could want them to have a little bit of cachet, finish with 1 loss, or lose and not grab one of those playoff spots. But it's going to be tough for LSU to finish the rest of the way without losing a game.
Yeah, I don't think LSU finishes with just 1 loss. They've still got to go to A&M, like you mentioned. Then they've got to play Alabama, at Florida, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma.
Whew. And then you talk about Arkansas, and Sam Pittman made mention earlier this week that Taylon Green, the starting quarterback, is going to try to go. So that's going to be a huge issue for Arkansas. Is their quarterback, can he play? And so they're going to play spoiler at some point. So is Auburn. Auburn's going to beat somebody. It may start this weekend against Missouri, but Auburn's got some games down the stretch. I think they're going to win a game or 2.
And we won't be back in the studio for another week after that.
Right.
So, pre-selected at the beginning of the season, Franco's Fab 15. Missouri at Alabama?
May not be as important as it was before. Tell me what happens with Alabama and Tennessee. If Alabama loses to Tennessee, they've got a tough sled ahead.
Well, I was thinking the back door for Missouri.
Yeah.
Who I wasn't impressed with coming into the season.
Me either. Dalvin Cook's a great quarterback, but I don't know if they've got what it takes to make it to the playoff, and I think they have losses coming too. I think it's just going to be a hodgepodge of parity at the end of the day.
And we already mentioned on the 26th, LSU has to go to A&M.
And right now, I like LSU. I like Texas A&M's chances. I think Texas A&M and Texas are the 2 best teams in the conference. That's why I think the game.
Wow.
I think Texas A&M and Texas will be for who goes to Atlanta at the end of the year. I really like Texas A&M's chances this year. Connor Wegman's a great quarterback. I love Mike Elko and what he's doing with that A&M defense, and I just really like Texas A&M. I think they're a team that's going to surprise some people down the stretch.
Okay, if Texas A&M, final game of the season, which we've had circled the whole year because I thought one of them could come in there undefeated. Looks like that might be Texas. And it's a rivalry game at A&M. Mm-hmm. And you say that could be for the conference championship.
I think Texas A&M could if they beat Texas, they would have them head-to-head, and Texas A&M would be one of the representatives in.
Why not both?
They could be.
Why would that not just replay that game on a neutral side?
They absolutely could. If Texas still goes unscathed, but where's Georgia in this? What happens with Georgia? If Georgia loses another
to Texas
game
this weekend,
or loses to Ole Miss in 2 weeks, or both, they've already got a loss to Alabama. So, craziness in the SEC.
This is the playoffs.
This is the playoffs. Yeah, that's
We've
right.
wanted it. We've begged for it. Now we just want you to make it bigger.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be some very good teams. Team number 8 through team number 16, maybe team number 20 is going to be hard to tell the difference.
It will be.
Somebody's going to get left out that was deserving.
And once again, I had someone that's a part of that committee say they believe a team with 3 losses is going to make the playoff this year. Think about that.
This has been episode 23 of Magnolia Fields from the Richard Schwartz & Associates studio. For Brad, I'm Franco. Until next time.